What the city is talking about. This is Montreal Now on News Talk Radio, CJAD 800.
You know, with any negotiation that we have, there's a point that both parties are heated and the temperature needs to come down. And I thought this was the right decision. They understand how serious we are about the electricity and the tariffs. And rather than going back and forth and having threats to each other, we have both agreed, let cooler heads prevail. We need to sit down and move this forward.
That's Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, walking back his original plan, which was to impose a 25% tariff, or call it what you will, on electricity being exported to American states. Very vehement about that yesterday, even this morning, before, as I just said, walking it back this afternoon. So, James Mennie over at the Montreal Gazette, what do you make of this?
Well, first of all, my initial observation is that I have spent more time talking about Doug Ford in the past 2 weeks than I have in my entire life, which in and of itself is quite remarkable. The other thing is that big, wet, slurpy, squishy sound you heard earlier today was the sound of the White House blinking. Yes, Crazy Doug Ford has managed to get Trump's attention. They called him. They called the meeting. They want to sit down and talk because why? Because even though one of my topics yesterday was, did Doug Ford go too far? Apparently not. That's how you get this White House's attention. The guy opens up his coat. They saw it was lines of dynamite, and they said, okay, let's everyone just calm down and talk. Of course, Trump is going to try and turn around and make this look like it's a triumph. It's his idea.
Sure.
All the Canadians caved. But guess what? They didn't cave. And all this, it's so funny because, you know, elbows up and whatever and symbolic gestures. The guy who's getting things done is Doug Ford. He's turning around saying, you want a trade war? Here's a trade war. Because even though 2 of the 3 states affected are perceived as blue states, Democrat states, the fact is, here's this one Canadian guy affecting 1.5 million American households by driving up the price. And it's not a lot of money, $400,000 a day. No one's going to go broke on that. But the fact is, this is just the beginning. Meanwhile, we're seeing all kinds of reports. The billionaires who thought they had bought and controlled Donald Trump are losing literally hundreds of billions of their money on this incompetent clown. The markets speak for themselves, and it's like I say, in the end, it's not going to be the billionaires. It's going to be the people who are watching their 401ks get turned into fireplace kindling because Donald Trump is nuts. He's got no plan. This is no art of the deal. This is the art of being completely nuts, which is exactly what's going on. So in the end, we have Howard Lutnick, who only this past weekend was actually saying on one of the weekend talk shows, saying, wouldn't it be great if we had a Department of External Revenue that would collect all the revenue in tariffs and we wouldn't have to pay income tax? Yeah. That's the grift that Trump is running on the American people. The problem is, even the thickest of his supporters know when they're losing money. Everyone's losing money on this, and honestly, I'm impressed. I'm surprised and impressed that Doug Ford was able to get this so quickly and get the White House's attention so quickly. I'm sure he's not going to walk out of there empty-handed because, quite frankly, if he does, I think that may inspire Francois Legault, who's been kind of on the fence right now in terms of making moves. But he's going to see the example of Doug Ford, and he'll probably throw in, not necessarily on electricity because we already have a hard contract with Vermont, but there's New York apparently and Massachusetts that they could rethink how much they're going to charge them for the electricity. Plus, there's aluminum. So Trump can say it's a million zillion percent for his tariffs. The fact is, genuine, tangible pushback from Canada clearly gets results. And it wouldn't surprise me if we see a complete change in the tone, not exclusively because of Doug Ford, although he certainly will be a catalyst, but because of all the other things I've mentioned that are happening right now south of the border. I heard you talking on Carlton Trail before. Yes, things are happening on it's like a minute-by-minute situation. It's 10 times worse in the States right now. People literally don't know what the hell is going on. All they know is whenever they check the markets, they're all heading down. They're heading down fast, and they're heading down at a quicker rate than they have in the entire year. It is really approaching the edge of a cliff, and someone's going to have to hit the brakes. And I think Lutnick saw a chance. He grabbed it, hence the meeting on Thursday.
By the way, just for people wondering, the Dow today closed down another 478 points. That's about 1,500 points in 2 days. So there is that. But I want to just point out, have you heard this conspiracy theory, Jim, where people are saying this is exactly how they planned it, to drive the price of stocks down so they can buy back in?
Yeah, exactly. But here's the problem. That would make sense. But if you're doing it every other day, which seems to be what Trump is doing, I would suspect that to a certain extent, the market, which isn't completely stupid, would anticipate that, realize what's going on, and perhaps the drop would not be as precipitous. I think, though, there is a consensus growing that Donald Trump, there is no plan, there is no conspiracy. This guy is completely incompetent, completely nuts, been drinking his own bathwater, been dealing with a bunch of yes men for way too long for him to understand that he is blowing up the country that legally elected him to be president of the United States. So to a certain extent, there's a part of him that says couldn't be happening to a nicer bunch of people. But on the other hand, the rest of the world has got to put up with this garbage as well. So let's hope that, as Mr. Ford suggested, cooler heads will prevail, and perhaps the hottest head of all will be shoved into a bucket of very, very cold water, if not by the people of the United States, rather than the billionaires who basically put him in office, because they, too, are losing money big time, and that's something they really don't like to do.
By the way, there have been many tweets from Donald, or posts on social media, on Industry Social said, my favorite one, I read this before, when this Ontario surcharge on electricity happened, he wrote part of a post, Ontario just announced a 25% surcharge on electricity, of all things, and you're not even allowed to do that. That's an actual post.
That is an exact, and I'll tell you, Aaron, I don't know if you've ever been in that situation. I was when I was a kid. I'm sure a lot of our listeners were in there. That is the sound a bully makes when he just got punched in the face. Like they do that double take, and they go, "What? You're not supposed to do that."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And this is what, and I guarantee you, even though Trump is simply too thick to understand that, I'm sure his entourage is going, "This is one guy. This is one tariff." And already the president is rattled, and they haven't even begun, because really Mexico hasn't done anything.
Yeah.
Mexico hasn't announced any measures, nor Europe. But even just with Doug Ford, which really I felt, was more of a symbolic gesture in terms of the electricity. Like I say, it's not a huge amount of money, but it was just the first pushback. For them to blink that quickly suggests to me that they're either going to say, we've got to change the channel, we've got to change the tone, we've got to find a way to get out of this, or down the road, and I'm very sorry, and it's not wishful thinking on my part, we may see a movement within the states to invoke the 25th and get rid of Trump.
Let me just play this. Just happened apparently a few minutes ago. Brian managed to get this. So this is Trump reacting to this whole Ontario electricity thing. Here you go.
As you know, there's a very strong man in Canada who said he wasn't going to charge a surcharge or a tariff on electricity coming into our country. He has called and he said he's not going to do that. Okay, he's not going to do that. And it would have been a very bad thing if he did, and he's not going to do that, so I respect that.
Hey, it's already a win for Donald Trump before they even had this meeting, Jim. No surprise there.
That's the thing. And once again, as I say, we called him? No, it was precisely the opposite.
Yeah.
It was Washington that called Ford. And indeed, I just heard you mentioning this idea of protocol. The reason why Carney, or even Trudeau for that matter, for Thursday's meeting, cabinet ministers, LeBlanc's going to be there as finance minister, and Doug will be there as premier of Quebec, but also head of the Canadian Federation. And that's it. Unless Trump is in the meeting, you don't bring your top guy down, whoever that might be at the moment in Canada. But
fair enough.
This is it. You're going to keep at the same level. But all that said, even you hear the tone of voice in that clip, Aaron. Clearly, he was informed that it wasn't like, gee, do you mind if this happens? Clearly, he was told this is happening on Thursday, sir, and we've got to get out of this mess, sir. So let's just, keep our comments to a minimum and see what happens. But I'm pretty sure they're not inviting Doug Ford down there to double cross him.
Jim, before I get out of here, I want to go to the question I started with today. We haven't talked a lot about this, but some interesting text. This is the 5th anniversary of COVID having been declared a global pandemic. I'm asking people here to look back and remember, some of the things that we lived through. Some of the things the government got right, some of the things the government got wrong, and things we learn in the event this ever happens again. What do you think?
I think first of all, in Quebec, it was the 13th, because I remember I was in the hospital getting surgery, and my wife was able to come in and drop me off in the morning. She couldn't get in the hospital because they declared a state of emergency by that afternoon. But all that said, Aaron, a lot of the fundamental things that we take for granted now, working out of the house, the whole dynamic people have with going out, with spending money out, with dining, the whole thing, all that changed because of the pandemic. A lot of people dug their heels in and said, no, everything's going to go back. No, it will not.
Yeah.
It was a real fundamental change, I think, of how we looked at our daily lives, whether we liked it or not. That was perhaps a good thing from the pandemic. The deaths, of course, the flying blind, the people who deliberately did not wear masks, that's the downside. But in the end, I think, God forbid, if it ever happened again, we'd be better prepared mentally to deal with it than we were back then. But all that said, as I say, some very fundamental changes in the way we live our lives and the way we're going to be living our lives, even though the pandemic's no longer a part of the picture.
James Mennie at the Montreal Gazette. Thank you, Jim.
Adama.